Welcome back to the Bigger Than Birth podcast, where we're celebrating bigger bodies and beautiful births. I'm your host, Victoria Gaba, and each week we will be bringing you the real stories of plus-size moms as they share their journey through fertility, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. These stories highlight what it's like to navigate through this experience as a woman in a bigger body in hopes of creating representation for plus-size moms, both present and future. Thank you for being part of this community as we share these stories that are so much bigger than birth. Hi everyone, welcome to today's show. Before we get started, I just wanted to say that we are almost 2 months into this podcast and I could not be more excited. I appreciate so much the support that we have been shown so far and continue to get to share these stories of amazing moms. I would love if you would go follow us on all of our social media channels. It helps boost the algorithm. Definitely give us a review if you have time. It helps us get in front of other moms and other people on their fertility journey. So would love that support to continue on and just get us in front of more people. And super excited today. We are actually joined by Maddie, who is a mother of 3 beautiful little boys from Texas, as she shares her powerful story of navigating 2 very, very different pregnancy and motherhood experiences. At just 16 years old, Maddie faced a surprise pregnancy that totally upended her life as a high-achieving student. She opens up about the challenges of being a teen mom and the determination that led her to graduate both high school and college while raising her first son. Years later, Maddie shares how her journey takes another unexpected turn when she discovered she was expecting twins. This time, she faced a high-risk pregnancy marked with gestational diabetes and dealing with severe pre-eclampsia, which led to a complex C-section and a month-long stay in the NICU for the twins. Maddie joins us today to discuss the medical realities of multiples, the weight of postpartum depression and how that affected her, and the strength it takes to advocate for yourself and your children through the most trying of circumstances. I absolutely loved this conversation with Maddie, and I know you will too, so we will hand it over to her now. Hi, Maddie. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Hi.
We're super excited to have you. I know we have a really cool experience with your first birth and then second birth with the twins. But before we jump into that, do you want to tell us a little bit about you, your family, and where y'all are from?
Yeah, so my name's Maddie. We're a family of 5 now, and we live in Leander, Texas.
Very cool. So we will go into your first birth. So with your first son, were y'all trying to get pregnant when you did?
No, so with my first son, I was actually 16 years old. It was between my sophomore and junior year of high school, and we were not trying to have a baby. I don't know many 16-year-olds that are, so that was kind of a shock. But yeah, it's definitely was a surprise to me. I had been told at 14 that I was suspected of having PCOS. And so if I wanted kids in the future, it would probably be kind of difficult. And it was not, apparently.
Yeah, that is a disclaimer for all of the PCOS girls out there
Yeah.
that it is not always equal
No.
infertility.
Nope. And I have learned more since having twins about that. So I'll talk about it more with that part.
So talk us through finding out you were pregnant. I know there's probably a lot of emotions being that young and not expecting it. So talk us through finding out and kind of those early days of pregnancy.
So like I said, I was 16. I was super involved in everything in high school. I was an officer in FFA, which if you don't know what that is, that's Future Farmers of America. So we raised animals and competed in different job markets. I was actually at the store picking up shampoo to go wash my lamb. How the store I was at is organized, it's all the shampoo and then feminine products on the back wall. And I saw them and I was like, oh, I wonder when I'm starting my period. I need to look at that real quick. And I opened my little period app and it said 7 days late. And at 16, I was super regular, never had anything late, not even by a day or two. And so I saw that pregnancy tests were out on sale. And I was like, I don't think it's that, but I'll buy some tampons and a pregnancy test. And then I went to the ag barn and took it right then and there. And within, I don't even know, it said to wait 3 to 5 minutes. Within a minute, it said pregnant. And I just freaked out. I called my best friend at the time and was like, I think I'm pregnant. And she said, why do you think that? I said, well, the pregnancy test said I was pregnant. And she said, "Oh, yeah, that's usually pretty accurate." And I'll never forget, she just kind of told me, she was like, "Well, okay, cool. You're pregnant. What are we doing?" And I was like, "I don't know. I think we're having a baby." And so I ended up calling my son's dad later that day and told him, and he kind of had a similar reaction. He was like, "Okay, well, we're going to figure this out. It's going to be fine." And then it all snowballed from there. Um, I don't recommend this to anybody, but I told my mom in an argument that I was a pregnant teenager, which was not how you should tell your mom. And so the emotions at home were really, really high. My mom was super disappointed, honestly, because, like I said, I was involved in everything. I was a straight A, all AP student. And to her, it kind of like my future flashed in front of her eyes. Whereas to me, I was like, okay, I can get through this. It'll be fine. And so that was really hard for us. She was on like one pathway and I was on another, and her thought of what was possible was super different than mine. And so after about a month or two, where I actually went out of state to stay with my grandpa while tensions simmered, um, she kind of was like, "Okay, well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to take the same classes. I want to still be involved. Like, I'm still applying to college. Nothing's changed." And she said, "Okay, then that's what we're doing." And went from there.
That's awesome. I know those can be shocking moments for everyone
Yes.
involved. So the fact that y'all were able to kind of rekindle that and say, all right, we're doing this thing.
Yeah, and we definitely didn't have the best relationship while I was pregnant. My son's dad and my husband are different, and so my son's dad's family was not the nicest to me. He was not the nicest to me. There was a lot of cheating and verbal abuse and all of that stuff, and so it was one of those things where she was more upset that it was him than it was me going through this. And we're great now. I always say that like the switch flipped for us when I was in labor because I went into labor with my mom. And so things are great now, but during it was not good.
Yeah, for sure. And that's added stress on top of things, anyways.
Yeah.
So, besides your period being late, did you have any other typical pregnancy symptoms?
Looking back now, probably my best friends and I basically like lived together every summer because we just hung out all the time. We were those, high school girls. We were at the mall, we were swimming, we were everywhere. And once I found out I was pregnant, I started thinking back. My biggest thing was that, like, every day at 1 a.m., I wanted to wake up and go get French fries and buffalo sauce from McDonald's. And I just thought that was normal. And so looking back now, that was definitely should have been my first sign.
Yeah, the
Yep.
typical cravings, but also as a teenager, it's like
Yeah.
1 a.m. snacks from McDonald's.
Yeah. As a teenager, you're like, I'm awake. We're watching TV. Who wouldn't want McDonald's at 1 a.m.? So, yeah.
So, besides the cravings and everything, everything from there went pretty smoothly.
Yeah, with my first pregnancy, I started, honestly, I was super tiny. I was a wrestler in high school. I was 119 pounds. I had like a 4 pack of abs. I was working out 4 hours a day for sports. And I just didn't think I was pregnant. I didn't even believe it until I had to get an ultrasound. I didn't start showing with my first until I was 6 months, maybe 6.5. I always joke that I went home for Thanksgiving break from high school and came back looking like I ate the entire feast because I came back looking pregnant, and I was able to hide it up until then. And I didn't really tell anybody. I did find out that a few of the people who did know had told everybody, which is great. It's high school though, so it was kind of expected. There was a lot of bullying. I lost basically all of my friends except for two, and I'm still best friends with them today. But I lost like my group that I basically lived with in the summers. We went everywhere together. We did everything, the good and the bad, the ugly, all of it. Lost all of them. Um, and we haven't really had a conversation as to why. There was some mixed information that, our parents don't want us friends with the pregnant teenage girl. We don't want to be friends with you because of all the rumors. And so I just didn't really take it to heart. I tried to stay super positive because our high school was brand new. So I was the first ever teen mom at my high school. And so it was one of those things where I was like, if I let other people make me miserable, then I'm just going to be miserable. And so I didn't do that. So I still talk to them every once in a while, but for the most part, I went from having like a giant friend group to 2 people in the
Wow.
span of a month or 2.
Yeah, and at that age, that's such a hard thing, but for you to
Yeah.
have the maturity at that age to be like, "No, I'm in control of what people are gonna make me feel, that I'm gonna just stay positive." That's a big thing to do.
Yeah, and there was a lot of issues with my son's dad. I found out a lot, but once I found out I was pregnant, I kinda got the snowballed information from a lot of other people of I knew he had cheated before, but there was a lot more than I knew about, and so there was a lot more people, a lot longer cheating relationships, and so all of that just kind of kept getting thrown at me. I wasn't getting along with my mom. I didn't really have any friends, and so I just kind of, like, put my head down and focused on, "Okay, my goal is to get through school and to go to college and to raise a baby and love that baby." Like, I'm not gonna be mad about this. I made choices that got me in this position. And so I'm going to rock with it. That's what I kept telling my mom. I was like, that's all I can do. So that's kind of what I did. I just focused on school. And I had a few teachers that knew and were super awesome. God bless my 8 a.m. world history teacher, or US history, I think. She let me eat chili cheese tater tots in her classroom at 8 a.m. every single day when I was pregnant. She gave me my first ever Mother's Day card too.
Oh.
I know, and we've stayed in touch, and she came to my college graduation party, and she's been amazing, and so I definitely hung on to those few teachers that I had. I had teachers show up to my baby shower. When I had 2 friends there, I had 10 teachers,
Oh,
and
wow.
so it was awesome. Not all school staff felt that way. I did have a guidance counselor who basically told me, let's not do AP anything. Maybe you can switch to the alternative school so that you can be more of a real mom and be home. And I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. And she kind of told me, I'll believe that you'll get into these colleges you want to get into when pigs fly. And I got into all of them.
Yeah,
And
like, "I'm gonna show you."
yeah, so I have a flying pig tattoo because of that.
That's hilarious. That
Yeah.
is the best. Oh my gosh. Obviously, you were very determined, like, "We're gonna stay on this path." Talk us through, as you got towards the end of pregnancy, what was that like, or how did you end up going into labor?
So the end of pregnancy, as you can imagine, I turned 17 while pregnant. So the end of pregnancy as a 17-year-old going to high school full time, and I was working full time at the time in the evenings, was rough. It was horrible. With my oldest, I went to 41 weeks and 5 days and had him over spring break. And so I literally went home from spring break and I think just laid in my bed and didn't move because I was so miserable. My mom is a nurse, and so she knows all the things and basically was like, I think you're in labor. You don't look good. You haven't felt good for the whole day. You're saying you're super crampy, all the stuff. And I very kindly, as a 17-year-old, said, you have no clue what you're talking about. Get out of my room. Don't talk to me. And so my mom and I argued a lot. And she said, well, fine. If you're fine, then you're coming to the movie theater with us. And so I had to go to a family movie night at the movie theater. And I very distinctly remember this. We saw the new A Wrinkle in Time, and we were sitting in the movie theater, and I was like, these cramps are really bad. I was clenching the sides of the seats, breathing. It was me, her, my youngest brother, and my youngest sister. And they're actually the same age, but they're not twins. We're a blended family. And my little brother was so cute. At the time, they were probably like 8 or 9. So they don't really understand, but he's so cute. He has a super thick country accent when he was little. And he was like, well, if your water breaks, we'll just tell him you spilled Sprite. And I just remember laughing, sitting there, and just being in a lot of pain. And she was like, okay, open this app. And it was a contraction timer. And she was like, just start timing it. That way you know if they're regular. And that's what I did. But I didn't know what a regular contraction really looked like. And so I was like, yeah, no, they're pretty regular. And she was like, okay, well, do you want to go? And I said, no. And had my full like pre-birth crash out. That's what I like to call it, where I said, we paid for the movie. I'm not going to go to the movies anytime soon. I want to stay. I want to finish the movie. And she's like, okay. So we stayed. And I just remember during this one really bad contraction was the scene where one of the characters was like in a tree yelling at people. And I was like holding on for dear life on my seat. The man next to me looked like he was concerned that he was about to have to birth this baby for me. So it was kind of funny. Then we're walking out of the movie theater, throwing my trash away. And my mom goes, okay, so what are we at? And I was like, 2 minutes. And she said, what? I was like, yeah, they're like 2.5 minutes apart. She said, for how long? I was like, the last 30, 40 minutes. And she said, you're supposed to go at 5 to 7 minutes. And I said, oh, I didn't know that. So we rush home. I rushed to the hospital. And by the time I got there, I was 6 centimeters dilated, 90% effaced, and still didn't know what that meant. They were like, okay, we're going to transfer you. And I was like, oh, no, I can walk. I'm good. I'll just let my mom know that I'm leaving. And they were like, no, 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 no. You're having the baby. So that was probably about 9 o'clock at night. I got my epidural within 30 minutes of being there because I was progressing so quickly. They were like, if you want it, you have to get it. So I got it. And then just kind of hung out. I was 17. I watched iCarly while I was in labor. And at 5 a.m., they kind of said, okay, you're at a 9 right now. Let's try to get you over that little hump because sometimes you get kind of stuck. And so I got stuck at 9. They used the peanut ball, which when you have an epidural, you can't feel your legs. But I had turned my epidural off because I wanted to be able to feel kind of some of the pressure to help me push. And so I had shut it off to where I wasn't hitting the button to where it was continuously going. But I just remember when they came in and put the peanut ball under my legs, I didn't know any of this stuff. They were just coming in doing things. And I told my mom, I was like, I think my leg's falling. She was like, no, you're not. And it did. And it fell and like smacked on the hospital table. So to me, it was kind of, I always say with my first being in labor and the hospital was like the light at the end of the tunnel. It was a great pregnancy because I made it great, not because of my surroundings. And I was so excited to get to meet him and do all of that. But they came in and I pushed for about an hour, hour and a half, minimal tearing, like nothing that required stitches. My placenta, though, didn't detach. And so I was in excruciating pain. They had to manually remove my placenta. It was horrible. I always say, even after my delivery with my twins, which was rough, and we'll talk about that, I always say that like I would have rather had 12 more kids than had to manually have my placenta removed. It was horrible. I'm shocked it did not pass out. They had the oxygen masks ready, but I was in so much pain that like I don't really remember a lot of it. I just remember the pain and like trying to not move so that they could do it. But it was rough. My son, we had no complications with him though. He was 6 pounds, 12 ounces, even at 41 weeks, 5 days. He's a little peanut. My milk came in. Second day I was at the hospital. Didn't know anything about that either. So didn't start pumping, didn't do anything. And I had 105 fever. They thought I had pneumonia. And I almost had mastitis by the time I left the hospital. So that was kind of rough. But other than that, my labor and delivery with him and everything with him as a baby wasn't difficult. Besides being 17, like all of that, it was great. It was fine.
That's great. And I feel like part of that probably is the naivety of not doing all of the research and not
No.
knowing what to expect, so you don't have anything to compare
No,
it to.
I didn't WebMD like worst case scenario. When they were like, oh, your placenta's not coming, I was like, oh, well, that sucks. I didn't know what that meant. My mom did though. She was a nurse and she had helped with L&D before. And she was like, okay, just deep breaths and listen. I was like, what are you talking about? and then they started.
Oh, wow. I've heard that's a very painful
It is.
procedure, but you had no complications after that?
No, no complications whatsoever. Like I said, I didn't need any stitches, which was nice. I just had external tearing from like skin not stretching super well. And so my recovery was super easy. I don't remember anything being super painful except like laughing. I remember that hurting really bad the first like few days, but no. I will say one thing that was I always think is funny now, and it goes back to you didn't know what to research. I didn't know you could get out of your hospital gown. So I was in a hospital gown for like 3 days. And by the time I left, the lady was like, "Oh, that must feel so nice. Why didn't you choose to put your normal clothes on?" And I was like, "What do you mean?"
I didn't know
She's
that was
like,
an
"I
option.
know. I had pajamas and cute stuff packed and didn't know that I could even put that stuff on because, hospital staff doesn't know that you don't know that. Most people know." I had no clue. So I lived in a hospital gown for 3 days
So I'm sure that was a moment where you're like, okay, I'm going to note this for
for the future.
down the road.
Yep.
So those early days, bringing him home from the hospital, how was postpartum in the early days?
It was pretty good. I don't feel like I had the baby blues with my first. No postpartum depression. I didn't really get like hit with that. He was a really great baby, and so that helped a lot too. Plus, I lived with my parents, and my mom's biggest thing was she used to always say, and she still says it. She wishes that she got to live with her mom the first year of her baby, so she was super helpful. She would make me breakfast and dinners and lunches. And if I needed to shower, she would let me put him in his rocker near her. She worked from home, so that helped too. But he was really awesome. I just kind of followed the schedules that I was kind of told babies follow, and it worked great. I breastfed him for about 4 weeks, and then I was an oversupplier with my first, which is awesome. When I went back to school, I couldn't keep up with it. In Texas, you have 6 weeks after you deliver a baby. It's when you have to go back to school.
Wow.
Yes. And so that was also in the peak of spring semester of junior year, which means SAT testing, ACT testing. And so a week after I gave birth to my son, I was actually back up at my school having to do testing and then go back home to him. And so you can breastfeed and go back to school, but what that means is that you're leaving class to go pump. You have to walk around with a lunchbox with your breast milk. They don't let you store it in like the nurses' refrigerators and things like that. And so it was just really difficult. Some of my teachers, honestly, my female teachers were kind of understanding, but my male teachers were really like, you were just gone for 6 weeks. Why are you trying to leave class again? And so it felt super difficult to stay on top of schoolwork, not miss things, and be able to do it. Plus, he was in daycare, and I didn't feel like I was producing enough for daycare and then being able to do at home. So I stopped. That was the best decision for me with him. I cried to my mom about it because I feel like there's such a stigma against not breastfeeding and stopping. And especially because I was 17, I already got a lot of hate for a lot of other things. And so I cried to my mom, told her I felt like a failure, that I wasn't doing well. And she very kindly was like, "Do you want your baby to starve?" And I said, "No." She said, "Okay, cool. So you're choosing to feed your baby. That's what good moms do. Doesn't matter how it happens." And she just was awesome about it. Went and bought me my first can of formula to try with him and was super, super supportive. And so that was a blessing because I know a lot of people don't have supportive people around them when they stop breastfeeding. And so it was it was crazy. But with him I had a lot of anxiety. I didn't want to go do anything. His dad was still in the picture, kind of. He was there in labor. And I say there, he was in the room, but not participating very well. But to me, it seemed like he was trying at the time, but we didn't last much longer after I had him. He would show up to my house where I lived with my mom, maybe once, twice a week, if that, maybe every week. And it was very much so like, well, I want to see him. You need to bring him to me. which is just super hard when you're postpartum. And so it didn't really happen a ton. And then by the time I did start going, his family kind of started being really negative again. And it just kind of got to the point where I felt like I had to do things to kind of pacify them. And just, I didn't want to hear it. And so I kind of lost that motivation of doing what I needed to do and just doing things to kind of make the situation a little easier. Yeah, it was a crazy period with him and his family. We do co-parent now. I say co-parent with a grain of salt. We try our best. It's still difficult. I think when you have a baby with somebody and you're both so young and there's just a lot that goes with it, I think that the influences from family and just honestly social media, of what you think it's supposed to look like, they don't always meet up. And so it's hard sometimes, and then sometimes it's great, but it's been a long journey. Our son's about to be 8 years old now, and so it's kinda crazy, but we've had really a few great years where it's been easy to co-parent and then a few years where it's horrible. So, it's a roller coaster, but I think parenting all the time is a roller coaster.
So, jump forward a few years later and
Yes.
your pregnancy with the twin. So, talk us through kind of that time period in between that briefly, and then
Yeah.
walking through finding out you were pregnant for the second time.
So, in the span, I said I was super small with my first, right? I was 119 pounds, tiny girl. By the time I had him, I was 180, which my doctor said it was a great pregnancy. All of that was awesome. I dropped back down to like 130 within 2 weeks of having him, and then got put on birth control and gained all the way right back. And so then I went off to college. We all know the freshman 15. Imagine that when you're shoveling, you know, mac and cheese and stuff into a 2-year-old's face. So in college, I gained a lot of weight. I definitely tried to work out, but I worked 3 jobs. I was in school full time, and I was raising my son, and so it was pretty difficult. I went to Texas A&M University, so I was away from my mom. I still have family there, but away from the majority of it. So fast forward to I've graduated college. My husband and I are together. We actually were dating and went and got engaged. And the morning after, I woke up and was like, I do not feel good. I threw up 3 times. I had thrown up a few times the day before and just thought it was maybe food poisoning or car sickness. I get super motion sick. And so didn't think anything of it. Then one of my favorite pair of pants didn't fit super easy. So I thought I was just bloated. And so I was like, okay, I'm fine. Was super congested too. The morning after we got engaged. And I was like, I just don't understand this. Like, this isn't, I haven't eaten anything different. I haven't done anything different. Um, and so I had a pregnancy test in my makeup bag. And I was like, my period's not supposed to start for like 2 more days. Let's just see. And we weren't trying, but we weren't preventing anything because I had just gotten off of birth control pills, a different one than I had been originally put on, and was told my PCOS would make it take a while if we wanted to have kids. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I had been off of it maybe a month and a half, and that pregnancy test was positive real fast. And I always laugh. I'm a moo wearing girl. Okay. I'm not ashamed. I buy all of them from Walmart when they have all the prints. And I ran in, we were in a hotel room, to my husband at 7 a.m. and woke him up and I said, I need you to read this. And he said, huh? And I handed him a pregnancy test. And he said, it says pregnant. And I said, yeah. And if you're not pregnant, who's pregnant? And he was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. But this was the morning after we got engaged. And so I was like, oh crap. Like everybody's going to think we got engaged because I was pregnant. Here we go. There was a lot of issues with some of his family. Like they didn't want to meet me because they knew I had a kid and they didn't want him with somebody who had had a kid. Reasonings we still haven't really figured out yet. So I hadn't met half of his family. And my family and his mom and her wife and like my grandpa and my mom and stepdad and siblings, they were all there when I got proposed to. We all celebrated together. We were supposed to go hang out with them that morning. And I called my mom and I was like, hey, I'm just really tired. I don't think we're going to make it to brunch. And she's like, that's fine. We're tired too. And I just remember feeling like I was 16 again. Like I was still 16 and pregnant. I didn't know what to do, didn't know who to talk to. And I just the whole car ride home was freaking out. Mind you, I was a teacher, had a full time job and insurance. He had a full time job and insurance. We were fine.
And what was the age gap? So between your first and then finding out you were pregnant the second time?
I had my first in 2018 and then found out I was pregnant in 2024. So he was 6, about to be 7. Yeah. And so he has a younger sibling with dad and stepmom and loves her. And so I was like, okay, it's going to be fine. And nobody who doesn't have twins in their family, because we don't have any, thinks that they're going to have twins. And so I was like, I had one baby when I was 17. We're going to be okay. It's going to be fine. I'm not stressed anymore. Got myself some snacks from Buc-ee's on the way home and I was good. We kind of did some math and thought, okay, maybe I'm about 5-6 weeks along. So we made an appointment at a boutique ultrasound place and in Georgetown. I actually think that Sydney, my friend you interviewed for another episode, I think she went to the same one or we've talked about it, but we went in to just confirm heartbeat. And so when we did, there was only one baby. And so I was only 6 weeks along when we went in, which we thought I would have been 9 or 10. And so got the confirmation of heartbeat. We told our family at Christmas, just family, because I was only about 8 weeks, that we were having a baby, singular. Then on New Year's Eve, I had my appointment with my OB. And so I went and they did a more in-depth, they did the intrauterine ultrasound, which the other place didn't. And so they did the intrauterine ultrasound and she moved the wand and it flipped and there was 2 babies. And I just turned and looked at her and she said, "Did you know you were having twins?" And I said, "What?" I said, "No, we went somewhere and they said there was one baby." And she was like, "That's 2 babies," and showed me. I didn't take it well. I immediately started sobbing for the remainder of the 30-minute ultrasound, mind you. This is right at the beginning. So for 30 more minutes, while she is still inside my body doing an ultrasound, I'm hysterically sobbing, telling her, "It's fine. You don't need to stop. Let's get this over with." My husband is next to me. He's like, "This is so amazing. This is awesome." And I just kept telling him, "Shut up. Stop talking to me." And I was crying. Then it was like everything could go wrong at that appointment went wrong. We went to the OB side and then the fire alarm in the building went off. So I'm freaking out because I'm having twins. The fire alarm's going off. We have to evacuate. My OB came up to me and was like, "Oh my gosh, hi, how are you?" And I was like, "I'm having twins." And she's like, "Oh, I had not talked to the ultrasound tech yet." And I was like, "Well, when you do, she's going to tell you there's 2 of them." She's like, "It's okay. We're going to get it figured out." And so that's where that started at 13 weeks. We found out that we were pregnant at 3 weeks with twins.
Wow, that is such a shock. Initially, the shock of, okay, we're being pregnant, going through this again, even
Yep.
though it's a much different scenario than the first
Yeah.
time. But then to find out you're going to have multiples as well.
Yeah. And for my husband, these are his first. And so he doesn't have any kids from prior relationships. And even he in prior relationships didn't think he necessarily wanted kids. And then when we got together, he and I kind of talked about it and I said, "I'd really love at least 1 or 2 more." And he was like, "Honestly, I do really want kids now that I'm getting older." And so when I found out, he was super excited. We were excited, still nervous, but then the multiples hit. And it's just a different ball game. Like, we had financially planned, okay, we can have one. We can still afford daycare. I can still work. With two, that all changes.
Yeah, that's a lot different equation at that point.
Yes.
So after that meeting with the OB, do you mind sharing? I know you had said there was a little bit of weight gain from your earlier teen pregnancy till now. What was your weight when you found out you were pregnant this time?
So when I found out I was pregnant, mind you, at the OB, I was already like 12 weeks. So when I found out at that point, I was, I believe, 249 or 250 pounds. And so I was wearing like size 16, 18s, extra large, extra large, depending on like where I was ordering from. And that very quickly changed. With my twin pregnancy, it was not like my first pregnancy where I didn't show forever. I swear I looked 6 months pregnant at like 19 weeks. I wore belly bands starting at 18 weeks because it was so painful. And I was a full time teacher. I taught sixth grade science and loved my students. And so we did all the fun stuff. We did the labs and the experiments, and my team that I worked with was amazing. But I was insanely pregnant and it was so uncomfortable. It was rough.
Did you have any other symptoms besides that early nausea with the twin pregnancy?
I don't think so. This is going to sound so crazy, but I'm still saying it. So when I was 17 and pregnant, right? I wasn't 21, so I couldn't drink. That wasn't in my radar, right? As somebody who was like 24 and pregnant, all I was craving my pregnancy was margaritas and like spicy foods. And I never was a big breakfast person prior to my twin pregnancy. And even now I'm a breakfast person, but I never wanted to eat in the mornings. Like, I was that girl, even though I had gained a lot of weight and like was doing all this stuff, I could wait until 11 or noon to eat and be fine. Not when we were on our trip where we got engaged. Those first few days of our trip, I was like shoveling everything I could into my mouth for breakfast. We went to the gas station and I got breakfast tacos, and I just wanted everything for breakfast. I really craved Scotch eggs. They're so good, especially when you're pregnant. But they're basically hard boiled eggs that are like covered in sausage and like deep fried. 10 out of 10. But that's all I wanted was margaritas and like breakfast tacos and Scotch eggs, the weirdest things. I just thought that was because we were on a trip. And so prior to knowing I was pregnant, I had like 2 margaritas and a pina colada. And my doctor told me, she was like, "You're fine. It's okay. Don't stress about it." But then my whole pregnancy, I wanted margaritas. And so that was the big difference. I didn't have them the rest of my pregnancy, but I wanted them.
That's like the worst craving to have too. Is like it's something I think that happens so often, like the things you're
Ugh.
not supposed to have in pregnancy, like deli sandwiches or alcohol. Like those are the things that you want.
And sushi, I've had sushi maybe twice in my life, but every time I've been pregnant, I've wanted sushi. With my first was actually the first time I ever ate sushi because I was craving it. And my grandpa, who I love him, he's honestly my best friend. I was visiting him in Arizona and I've been telling him I'm craving sushi, but I've never had it. And he said, "How does that make sense?" I said, "I have no clue, but I want it. Like, I need it." And he took me to a sushi restaurant and was like, "Okay." He's a doctor also. He was like, "You can get these things." And I was like, "One of everything," devouring it. And so I always used to joke with my best friend, like her and I, when we were like in college. I was like, "Oh, as long as I'm never craving sushi, I'm fine." As soon as I found out I was pregnant, 2 days later, I woke up and I was like, "I need sushi today." And so it was it's
That's your
horrible.
telltale sign.
I know. So I always used to jokingly tell my husband that too before, because we had started like not protecting against it because we were told it was going to take so long. And so it's like, well, if I ever crave sushi, that's a good sign. And he jokes now. He's like, "Oh, I wish you were still pregnant so we could go eat sushi all the time.
You're like, I don't want it now.
No, it was the same thing with margaritas. Now I'm like, man, they're fine. I used to buy the Margaritaville water flavor packets, and I would make it take these like fancy glasses we have and put salt on the rim and like tahini and make me water with it. And I was like,
Yes.
gosh, this is the best.
My virgin pregnancy margaritas, please.
Literally.
That's so funny. So, moving forward with a twin pregnancy, did they let you know, like, this is going to be a little more high risk, or did they make you see a different doctor with that pregnancy?
Yeah, so twin pregnancies are really crazy. So basically, it went from like a normal OB appointment to you're going to have to go start seeing a specialist also. And so I started seeing my maternal fetal medicine specialist pretty soon after that. And that's just a high risk doctor. People who aren't pregnant with twins can see them also. One of my friends saw them as well. And so it's basically a doctor who just is like specially trained in monitoring those like high risk issues. And so the thing that we had to make sure of with twins is there's 3 different types of twins. There's di-di, which is what we have, which means you either had 2 eggs and 2 sperm, or I think it's like 1 egg and 1 sperm, and then they split. But the split is not super common. With di-di, they're almost always fraternal. There's only a 30% chance that they're identical. We have di-di twins. That means I hyperovulated and had 2 eggs, and then they're both fertilized. And so our babies had their own placentas, own amniotic sacs, own everything. That's the best case scenario twins you can have. Then you have modi, which is I always forget if it's the same sac but 2 placentas, but there's di-di, which is what we have, there's modi, and then the least common ever are momo, which is same sac, same placenta. And so, depending on what type you have, depends on your level of high risk and how long you'll end up going. So I know for some friends I've made who have Modi twins don't really go past like 36 or 37 weeks from what I've kind of heard through the grapevine of all my twin people now. But for Di, you can go up to 39 weeks, I think is the latest that doctors will let you go before inducing if you don't go into labor before. So I knew that that was more common going into labor early. I also knew that gestational diabetes was more common with twins. I also knew that you just kind of run a lot more issues. Thankfully, we, with the type of twins we had, didn't have the same risks as a lot of other people. So we weren't worried about, one baby getting more nutrients over the other, things like that. But it very quickly went from a normal pregnancy to I was seeing my OB once a month, MFM once a month. So I would see my OB and then 2 weeks later, my maternal fetal medicine doctor. And that went on until maybe 28, 30 weeks. And then I was seeing my MFM every 2 weeks and my OB every 2 weeks. So every week I had an appointment, basically. It was a lot. You also do your gestational diabetes testing super early with twins. And so I knew I had gestational diabetes prior to 18 weeks, which was horrible because then you have to deal with it for longer. But I had diet controlled. And so I wasn't on medication for it. I just did the finger pricks in the morning when I was fasting. And then I think it was either 1 to 2 hours after I ate every single meal. And my numbers were fine until the very end when they started to kind of spike a little bit. I did learn you can't have Chick-fil-A while pregnant, which was very depressing.
Was that just because of the gestational diabetes?
Yeah, like all the sauces have the sugar. And then my MFM was super helpful, honestly, with my diet plan controlled gestational diabetes. Because, fun fact, Chick-fil-A's breaded nuggets have powdered sugar or some type of sugar like that in their batter. And so it would always spike my numbers. And I was super confused. I was like, I'm eating chicken. And she was like, no, it's not the same. So I had to eat all the grilled chicken, which when you're pregnant, you don't want that. Ugh.
With the diet control gestational diabetes, before that or during that diagnosis, did they give you like a threshold of we only want you to gain X amount of weight during the pregnancy, or what was that conversation like?
So, yes and no. It's kind of weird. I was actually more concerned with it because I kind of went into it as a girl who had gained a bunch of weight, who was already considered, I was like right on the cusp of plus size, where I was more concerned about gaining weight when I was pregnant because I didn't want to. And so I went in and asked my doctor the first time before we knew it was twins, like, "How much weight do you have to gain in a pregnancy? How much this? How much can you start working out? Can you?" Because I was just so concerned over it, which looking back now is so dumb to me. Like, it's it's gonna happen, but there's such a stigma on gaining weight when you're pregnant, especially when you're already a bigger person. And so they kind of were like, "Well, with twins, it varies." And so I was told anywhere from like 25 to 55 they thought was normal. Um, but my doctor did tell me, she said it's actually kind of weird. Sometimes when people have twins, we actually see that they gain less weight than when they have one baby. So with my first, I started at 119 pounds. I don't think I said it. I was 180 pounds at the end. With my twins, I started at 249, 250. I was 287 when I delivered. And so I actually gained less weight having my twins than I did with my single, which makes 0 sense to me. But it's because your body has so much other stuff going on. Like, the pregnancy hunger is still there, don't get me wrong, but you can't eat that much because your stomach is, like, in your chest. And so I would eat and just feel like I had to throw up if I ate too much. And so it was I always say that I think I ate less when I was pregnant with twins than I did the first time around because there's just nowhere for it to go. There was one point where I had a stomach virus, and because my stomach was literally like at the top of my rib cage, I thought I was having contractions because the cramping felt like what a contraction would feel like, but I just had a stomach virus. And so it's really interesting. I didn't think about that. And I was always telling my doctors, like, I can't eat. Like, I want food, don't get me wrong, but I can't eat unless I just eat and then I feel like I'm gonna be sick and I just accept that. She said, no, for twin pregnancies, once you're bigger, it's better to do like bigger in your pregnancy, it's better to do snacks throughout the day because your stomach is in your rib cage.
Yeah, and otherwise you're just gonna feel bloated and miserable.
Yeah, and that's horrible when you're a teacher of, like, 11 to 12-year-olds. They're stinky, and I love them, but they're stinky kids, and having the pregnancy nausea and, like, not being able to eat except very randomly, it was rough. And so, I just had to start eating little snacks. I was super addicted to chicken Caesar salads, and so I would eat those just periodically throughout the day.
I mean, hey, at least that's a healthy snack.
Yeah, because they stress with you. They're like protein, 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 because you're growing 2 babies. Another thing with twins is that you have a higher risk of C-section. And I knew that and just gaslit myself that that wasn't gonna have to happen. However, my babies stayed transverse the entire time, which means they are just sideways across your body the whole time, which is horrible. So, it was very different than just having one baby. Plus, you have the 2 placentas, and so it's a lot more than I thought it was even gonna be, and I was in it.
So, as you got towards the end of pregnancy, I know you said the risk for C-section kind of went up, and with them being transverse, when was that decision made of like, hey, we're going to go this route for delivery?
So, with twins, typically, you make a decision about 30, 32 weeks at the latest. We made mine a little earlier, 28 weeks, because both of them had been transverse the entire time. Um, And so they were just comfortable. And by the time you hit about 26 to 28 weeks, they don't really move a whole lot. There's not a lot of room left. And so my doctor said, I know you don't love this. And I said, it's fine. Whatever's safest, let's do it. Um, if they weren't both transverse, right? Because one was breech for one appointment and that was it. You do have the option of delivering vaginally and then hoping that second twin flips. However, if you don't, then you have a vaginal delivery and a C-section. And so that's what I didn't want. I knew that. I was like, listen, if we're not 100% that they're both coming out, I'll do a C-section. And so when they were both transverse, we made that decision. So kind of mentally prepared for it as much as you can as someone who's never had a C-section. So it was rough. Like I didn't know what to, if I felt like I was 17, I didn't know what to expect again. My mom has had C-sections and I talked to a bunch of other women and I kind of got the same answer. And it was, oh, it's hard, but it's not bad. You're going to be fine. And I think that that might be true if you don't have something to compare it to. And so having a super easy vaginal delivery with my first, I was like, "Oh, well, all these people say it's gonna be easy. This is gonna be a piece of cake." And it was not.
So, did they give you a date of like, okay, we're going to try to make it to 39 weeks when we schedule your C-section?
Yes. So my induction date or like C-section scheduled date was July 23rd. Um, but I would have been, I think, 38 weeks at that point. I could have gone to 39, but I was already so uncomfortable at 31 weeks when we made this plan. I was like, I don't think I could do it. So their due date was August 8th. I think it was 8th or the 6th. I was going to have them by C-section July 23rd, regardless. I ended up having them June 26th. So I think in total they're 6 weeks early. I got hit with pre-eclampsia pretty bad, which I will say is something that like you hear about, but I didn't even suspect that I had it, which is kind of scary looking back now. I've definitely thought to myself, like, did I have it for a lot longer than I thought? But I will say, as somebody who was plus size and pregnant with twins, the symptoms are migraine. I'm a migraine girl. I get migraines all the time, so that's not new for me. Swollen legs and feet. Everybody has that when they're pregnant, especially with twins. And then just kind of not feeling good, like all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of other things, but I just kind of chalked it up to I'm miserable because I'm pregnant with twins. My body is like breaking. I had, I always forget what it's called. I think it's called pubic symphysis, diastasis or something. My pelvis was like at its breaking point. I would sit up in the morning and it would like pop back in and out. And it was painful to the point where I couldn't sit down or get up off the toilet by myself, couldn't lift my legs to get in and out of the shower. I couldn't get in and out of bed on my own. My husband, in the summertime when our oldest was with his dad for his like custody time, he would go to work in the morning and come home and I would still be either in bed or on the couch because I legitimately couldn't move without being in severe pain. And so it was really, really hard. And so I just kind of thought, like, I'm miserable because I'm pregnant. It's hot outside because it was June in Texas, which miserable. So I didn't think anything of it. I went to my 34-week OB appointment. They took my blood pressure and it was, oh gosh, it was like 150 over 99. And they were like, ooh, that's a little higher than we like. They took it again a few minutes later. It was still, I think, 147 over 99. And then they just kind of kept taking it, never went down at my appointment. My feet were so swollen that I could not take my shoes off at my doctor's appointment or put them back on. I had Birkenstocks on. You know how you can undo the clasp to take your shoes off? That's how my doctor had to take my shoes off. She had to unbuckle my feet. It was bad. I have a picture of them and they were just like sausage feet. And I just thought it was because I was pregnant. And so she also asked me, do you have migraines? And I was like, yeah, but and I quote said, I'm a migraine girly. That's what happens. She said, okay, but are you seeing white spots? Are they lasting more than 3 or 4 days with Tylenol? And just kind of listed a few things and then waited for my answer. And I was like, yes. And she said, to which thing? And I said, oh no, all of it. And I love her. She put her hand on my leg and said, my friend, have we ever heard of preeclampsia? I said, I've heard the word, but I don't really know what it is. She said, well, I think you do because I think you have it. And so I was like, okay, so what does that mean? And at that point, I didn't understand how serious it was. Like, you always hear about it, but it's always one of those things where it's like, oh, it's super common, blah, blah, blah. So you don't think, oh, like this can be life altering. So she's sitting there telling me um, why they're concerned, what they're seeing. And I said, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, do I go home and just monitor? And she said, no, with twins and you being so far along and having all these boxes checked, I'm going to send you upstairs right now. And she goes, we have two options. Best case scenario, they go upstairs. We elevate your feet. They put these things on my legs to try to move fluid around because I had pitting edema really bad. She was like, your blood pressure comes down, your fluid is fine, and we're going to do labs and we're going to see how that all looks. If all of that's fine, you're going to probably be on bed rest here at the hospital until your C-section. And I was like, that's 4 weeks. And she said, yes, but this can change so quickly that that's our best case scenario, is that you're going to be on bed rest for 4 weeks here. And I was like, okay. I said,
Yeah,
well,
that's the best case scenario.
I know. I was like, I feel like there's better choices here, but that's fine. And she said that with twins, they want to monitor fluid, heart rates. One of our twins was measuring a lot bigger, even though they had their own placenta. My baby A, which how they determine it is whoever's closest to the opening of your cervix is baby A. So my baby A was in the 74th percentile in utero, and my baby B was 47th. And so we knew there was a size difference. So they wanted to monitor amniotic fluid. And so that was best case scenario, is I live at the hospital for 4 weeks. Worst case scenario, she took a pause and she just held my hand. She goes, worst case scenario, you have these babies tomorrow. And I was like, tomorrow? I was like, no, that means the NICU. And she's like, yes. And I legitimately told my doctor, my babies don't have to go to the NICU. Because my whole pregnancy, and I think twin parents do this a lot, we don't want the worst. And so I just told myself that the NICU was not an option, like I could control that. And so I went upstairs. They took all my tests. I was on the monitors and they did, I forget what test it is. I think it's a urinalysis where they look for proteins to see if you're spilling over extra protein in your body, which can lead to like organs starting to shut down. I got put on like stroke management. They started my magnesium drip before I had my C-section. And basically, I'm sitting there, I have my monitors on. I just have my normal IV going at this point, still have the migraine, still seeing the spots, still horrible pitting edema and swelling even after being elevated for 5 hours. And they said, we're just waiting on this one test to come back from the lab to see if you're spilling a ton of protein. What we're going to have you do is we're going to have you start doing a 24-hour urinalysis, which is the most humbling thing. They give you this like little bucket that you have to sit into the toilet to pee into, and then you dump it in a giant jug that you have to sit on ice in the bathroom, which is so great. They had me start doing that in case the lab came back and said that they needed that next. That way I think by the time I found out I had to have my babies, I was already 9 hours into my urinalysis, which then they just dumped my jug of pee down the drain, which I was like, come on.
I worked really hard for that.
I did. And so I was sitting there, and about 4 a.m., the doctor comes in and says, we just got your labs back. You're spilling a lot of protein. And with that combined with the migraines that haven't gone away and that you are still actively seeing spots, she said, you're going to have your babies today. And I was like, okay. And called my mom, and I'll never forget, I called her and I was like, hey, the baby bag is packed. Can you bring it? And she was like, you're not going to need that. And I was like, no, I will, because I'm going to have them and they're going to come home. And she was like, okay. And my mom brought it, and she was a nurse and she knew that I wasn't taking my kids home with me that day, but she still brought it. And so I woke my husband up at 4 and I was like, "Hey, you can still sleep, but we're gonna have the babies later." And he went back to sleep. And so they kind of just came in, told me, like, "You're having your babies." Um, my doctor was actually the one who was on that day, which was nice. So my OB did deliver my twins, but it was an emergency C-section in the sense that we had to do it for pre-eclampsia, but I did know I was having a C-section. So it wasn't as like traumatic as a full emergency rush straight in, but it was still pretty rough. So they came in, told me. Then a few hours later at shift change, I had the best L&D nurse. Her name's Sarah. We're still friends. And she was awesome. She, helped me take a shower before they took me to my C-section. Um, was just super helpful because I didn't know what to expect. And so it was just a waiting game at that point. I knew I was supposed to have my babies before noon. We were just sitting and waiting for my turn in the OR, which was crazy.
Yeah. So I know they kind of prepped you that, okay, you're going to be going into a C-section. Did anyone talk to you of what's going to happen after that regarding NICU time?
So kind of, um, with twins and NICU time, at 34 weeks, babies have to go. Most hospitals in Texas at 35 weeks is like the gray area. Some don't have to go, some do. So I knew that we 100% had to, but in my mind, I was like, they're going to be there 2 days and it's good. Well, the NICU team came and talked to me and was explaining that in the delivery room, each baby would have their own warmer. Each baby had their own NICU team. After they were born, depending on their status, which is what they say, depending on their status, you may or may not get to see them first, but then they'll be taken to the NICU. And I was like, okay, no problem. Like, thanks for letting me know. They gave my husband a lot of information. And he and I already knew that NICU was a possibility. And we had already talked about if something happens and they have to be taken to the NICU, you leave me in the OR and you follow them. That was what we were doing. My doctor and like OR staff was awesome. My mom scrubbed in when he left. They like tag teamed. And so I kind of knew what to expect, but not really. And I don't think there's a good way to know what's happening until you have to. But I knew that they each had their own team. I knew that they were going to be taken. It was just whether or not I was going to get to see them first or not. So that was kind of crazy to hear, like when you actually hear that, because, the golden moment that all moms wait for is to be able to hold their baby the first time.
Yeah, and to have that as a possibility. And I know it's still at that point you were trying to remain positive of like, "Oh no, everything's going
It's
to
not
go
going to happen.
completely fine." So talk us through when they said, "Okay, it's finally time going back to the OR." Walk us through that moment and kind of how the C-section went in general.
So they finally came and got me, said, "Hey, it's go time." My husband suited up and all the stuff. And then they're wheeling me back. Anesthesia had come and talked to me about, like, hey, we're going to do a spinal tap. When you get there, kind of how to sit. They were like, we're going to explain this to you all again in the OR. We just like to do it ahead of time. So I get wheeled into the OR, and they have you for C-section. They'll have you crawl off and then get on to the like OR table, and you sit on the edge, kind of similar to if you have an epidural, but instead of like holding something forward, you have to put your head down and remain super still. And there's somebody in front of you who kind of holds your shoulders and maneuvers them. And then they numb you up with lidocaine where they're going to stick you for the spinal. Now, this is where it starts because they messed my spinal up 7 times. Yes, it was horrible. By the time they finally got it, both sides of my back were completely locked up. I was shaking from being in so much pain. And it was actually my nurse who advocated for me because they had a student performing it, and I wasn't aware that it was a student performing it because I couldn't see. And so she wasn't in there at the beginning because she had to go scrub in. So she comes in, I'm sobbing. There's 3 people in front of me trying to hold me and turn me for this spinal tap at this point. And my body's shaking because it was so locked up. And she just said, "Are you okay?" And I said, I didn't think it was going to hurt this much." And she said, "How many times have they tried?" And I said, "This is the 6th." And she just I love her. She went, "We're done. You're done. We need somebody else." And she got the head of the anesthesiology, who was in the room too, to do it, and said, "They've tried 6 times, like, we're all for teaching, but this is not what we're doing." And they got it the first try the last time. So it only took like 7 tries, but yeah, and I just remember I had a lot of anxiety about what my spinal is gonna feel like, because I've heard it feels like you can't breathe, and that freaks a lot of people out, and so I kinda just kept telling myself, "If I can talk, I'm breathing." And I told them, I was like, "This is what I'm nervous about, and so if I'm starting to talk about random things, it's to remind myself I'm breathing." And my doctor was like, "I love that. Let's do it."
Like, let's chat it up.
Yeah, and so they're finishing the spinal, which it's all really quick. So they're finishing it, and that's when I can pick my head up, and I just look around, and it is like a wall of medical instruments just prepped out for me. And I turn and I look, and I see 2 incubators. I see like 3 or 4 people at each one. I see a ton of people. We had probably 15 people in our OR room, if not more. And I said, "There's a lot of people and a lot of stuff." And one of the other, um, I guess, operating room assistants, I don't know their title, but she was awesome. She literally put her hands on my face and said, "Don't look at any of it. Like, you're gonna have your babies, but don't look at everything in this room because it will start to freak you out." And I was like, "Well, I'm just trying to figure out what's for me and what's for them." She said, "Exactly. We're not gonna." She said, "Some of the stuff we don't even have to use. We just have to have the option. So we're gonna not look at it. We're gonna look at the tiles on the ceiling when you lay back in a second, and that's what we're gonna do." And I was like, "Okay." So they laid me back and they had me spread your arms out. And I just remember feeling super high. I was like, "Oh, that hit me. It's rough." And I was looking at the ceilings and I was thinking, how many tiles are in here? Like, what's happening? I can feel the pressure of them starting to prep me, but nothing else. And so it was super weird. My husband came in the room and he was like, "How do you feel?" And I was like, "I feel great." And then I had asked my doctor before, like, as long as they're good, can you lower the curtain because I want to see them being pulled out? And she was like, "Yes." And the anesthesiology team who was in there heard me ask the same thing. One of the sweet little med students, it was her first day ever, okay? She was like, "Do you want me to take pictures?" And I was like, "Yes." So she took my phone and over the drape was taking pictures for us. So we have all of that, which is amazing. But it was crazy. So I just remember laying there, them telling me it was going to start, and then just feeling like people were trying to throw me off the table. One of my twins was super, super low and the other was super high. And so both of them, when they were born, their feet were bruised, which can be kind of common with twins because of where they're positioned. But it was because he was so up against everything that all their little feet were bruised. And so it was rough. Um, with a C-section, you don't feel the pain, just the pressure and, like, the pulling sensation, and I remember at one point telling my husband, I was like, "They're gonna pull my lungs out of my body." They didn't, but that's what it feels like. It's hard to breathe because you can't feel your body. It's hard to breathe because 'cause they're pulling on you, and that was it. Both of our boys were born 2 minutes apart. One came out crying, one was alert but not crying, and so they did lower the curtain. I did get to see both of them, and then they took them to the warmer, and that was it. And then I was just laying there on the table, and I told my husband, like, "Go over there and tell me what's happening, go take pictures, do something." So he went over there. He has pictures with, like, the operating team, everybody. But the babies were good. My baby A was 5 pounds, 5 ounces. My baby B was 4 pounds, 13 ounces, and that was at 34 weeks and 1 day. Everybody was like, "These are big 34-week babies." So that was good. I did get to hold them, kind of. They bundled them up, laid them on me for about 10 seconds each, and then put them in an incubator, and they all left. And so at that point, my mom came in, and they were finishing up the surgery, closing me up, took me to the recovery room, and that's when it got, like, traumatic for my husband, I'll say, is because he was not with me at that point. He was chasing the NICU team to the NICU, and the operating room right next to me, mom ended up being okay, but mom did code during her C-section. And so he heard all the code blues to labor and delivery OR, all of that, and he thought that was me. And so he
Wow.
was frantically texting my mom, trying to figure out what was happening. She said everything was fine, and she just kinda stayed with me. I had the super bad shakes after my C-section and was super itchy even after they gave me Benadryl, and so I always say that, like, at that point, I was still super doped up, that I didn't know what was happening, didn't really understand the, like, gravity of it. It definitely felt different than when I had vaginally delivered my son, which is so hard to, like, think about, but it's just so different. Um but all of it went great. Like, I had no complications in my surgery, nothing post. The only thing was that I was on a magnesium drip, which meant that I could not go see my babies for 24 hours. And I thought I could talk the nurses into it. So I tried. I tried a lot. But I didn't. And so I ended up not going to labor and delivery after that. I didn't even get to go to the postpartum floor. I went to the antepartum floor, because the hospital I was at had a policy about if you're on certain medications, you have to be on a different floor to where they can monitor you. So I went to the antepartum floor and just sat in my room and watched TV, and that was about it. I didn't get to go see my babies. My husband would go up there and he'd FaceTime me, but I didn't get to meet them until the next day.
What was that like emotionally? Were you still kind of out of it with the medication and the magnesium drip, or was that kind of a raw moment emotionally?
Mm, at first, when I first got into the room, I was kind of out of it, and so I just kinda laid there. Um, I couldn't feel my legs yet, and so I also couldn't feel the pain I was in, and so I was just kinda laying there. I felt okay. I could definitely tell that, like, everybody around me started to, like, walk on eggshells because that's a hard moment, and I wanna say that it was maybe 4 hours, 5 hours after my C-section completely when I could feel my legs again was when I really was like, "Okay, well, I mean, like, I can get in a wheelchair. Like, can I just go see him? I'll ride in a wheelchair the whole time." And I was like, "I'll take this with me." And they were like, "No, we can't let you do that." And I think that's when it hit me because I was like, "I can walk," which I really couldn't. I still had a catheter in from the magnesium drip. I still had all this stuff. And so I definitely think that once I could feel my legs again is when it hit me, because in my mind, I was like, "Okay, once I can walk, I can convince them that I can go see them." And I didn't, and that was hard. The antepartum nurses were awesome though. Like, I don't know if, like, you had this experience after having a baby, but they kind of talk to you like, "Okay, what's your goal for the day?" and this and that, and mine was always pain management, and then on the day after was that I got to go see my babies. And so that was fun. I think I wasn't doing as bad because I had something to look forward to. I think once I hit the NICU was actually when, like, it all hit the fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the reason that they were in the NICU was just that they were early, or were they concerned with breathing, anything else like that?
So at first, it was just early until they could evaluate them. And then they needed help with breathing. Babies typically develop their suck and swallow reflex in utero at 35 weeks. And so that was a concern as well. So it kind of snowballed all together. They were both put on CPAPs with breathing support systems and basically the little baby masks. Sometimes they had to have the prongs up their nose, just providing like a higher flow of oxygen for them. They had IVs, they got vitamins, they had NG tubes for feedings, things like that. And so At first, it was just, okay, they're going to be early. We have to see what's happening. And then once they were here, they saw that their lung function wasn't super great. Um, my baby B, he actually did a lot better and he was smaller. He got taken off the CPAP first, and it was a week or two after, maybe. It all blends together, but I do know that my baby A, he had a lot more problems. And so they had to give him, oh, I always forget what it's called. It's called like surfactant or something like that, where basically your lungs produce it, like baby's lungs produce it. However, he wasn't producing it or producing enough of it. So it was kind of a med to kind of kickstart his lung function and development. And then he actually had to get caffeine given to him as well a few times to kind of help with his breathing. He did have a lot more, they call them events in the NICU, where he would Brady down, which means, we're losing he's desatting, all of that stuff. And that was pretty scary. He had pretty bad reflux. They both did at first, and his was a lot worse. There were a few times when we would be holding him and he would be feeding through his NG tube, and it would almost sound kind of like he gasped or coughed, and then he would desat and drop and turn blue. And so that was like really traumatic, having to see that a lot, having to unwrap your baby to like rub them so that they gain color back, move their limbs so that oxygen is flowing. That was really hard. And then also, you just miss a lot of the firsts. And so they were in the NICU in total. Baby B was 26 days. Baby A was 28 days. And that was just because our baby A had an event. And in order to qualify to leave, besides hitting all your other milestones, you have to be event free for a certain period of time. And so he had to wait to do that.
Got it. And so, going through all of this, how was your recovery physically? Were you able to stay in the hospital for a few days, or when did they decide to discharge you?
So I ended up staying in the hospital 5 days. I had them on a Wednesday, didn't go home until Monday. And that was because the magnesium drip, they still had to monitor my blood pressures. I did get eventually moved to the postpartum floor once they took the catheter and magnesium and all that away, which was nice, but it felt like not a long time, but forever at the same time. But I was only there for 5 days.
And recovery postpartum physically, like with your incision and everything, how did that go?
Oh, it was horrible. It was horrible. Everybody who said it was easier, they're liars. It sucked. It was awful. I literally was like, I'm never gonna walk again. I think that was one of my like most emotional times in the hospital was the first time I got to go see them. You have to be able to get up and get into a wheelchair. And so that's the first time I stood after my C-section. Mind you, it's 26 hours later. So like your body's super stiff, my back was locked up, everything. And I just remember my nurse and my husband trying to help me. And I just like broke down and was like, I'm never going to walk again. I'm never going to get to go to see them because I can't get out of bed. And she just sat me down and sat on the edge of the bed. And she was like, you're going to walk because you want to see them. And I was like, it just hurts. She was like, yeah, it does. It sucks, but it's going to be worth it. I promise. And I was like, okay. And she was like, you can scream. I loved her. Her name was Phoebe. She was like, you can scream and yell. I don't care. Go for it. I'll scream for you. And so I finally got up, sat down. We went to the NICU. And my recovery was just horrible because I just didn't really like care about myself, to be honest. It was mostly like when I was in the hospital, it was how often can I go see them? How many hours can I go? Like all of that. I didn't care about my pain management, any of that. And so what we ended up having to do after the first time I went and saw them, because I missed some of my pain meds. And so by the time I got back, I was sweating. I felt like I couldn't move. I did have to have one of those like breakthrough narcotic meds because I was in such a great level of pain. I literally thought I was going to throw up. After that, my nurse and I came up with this plan to have alarms set on my phone for 20 minutes before my next med, and that's when I had to come back down because it was just so painful. And so once I started doing that, it was better, but moving after a C-section is just horrible. And I swear to you, I don't remember fundal massages with my first. I swear they didn't do them. They did for sure, probably. But when they did them postpartum with a C-section, I thought I was dying. It was the worst pain of my life. I remember screaming one time when they did it, and the nurse was like, "Sorry." And I was like, "It's fine." I was
Like,
like, so
really, it's not, it hurts.
I was like so mad because it was so painful, but I got it. I was like, "It's fine, you're doing your job." But it was, I don't know, it was just rough. Like, it hurts to move, but it also hurts to sit. It hurts to get up, but it also hurts to not get up. And it was just not like a vaginal delivery. Like, you're sore with a vaginal delivery. I always used to say it felt like somebody kicked you really hard with a vaginal delivery. But with a C-section, like, your whole body hurts. And so it was just not what I was expecting. I had heard so many people be like, "It's not the easy way, but it is easier than a vaginal." And I'll say this right here. If you've had a C-section, it is way worse than a vaginal delivery 20 times over. I would take a vaginal delivery over a C-section any day of my life. And I feel like that's so different than the thought, but my nurses were great. I stayed on top of my pain medication after that. Didn't have to do any more breakthrough meds, which was great. It was just it was a rough recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know everyone's recovery is very differently, but it is not for the faint of heart. Regardless, it's major abdominal surgery. So,
And you have to walk right after. Like, that's just
yeah.
cruel.
And add in the emotional side of it with your babies being in the NICU and, like you said, your
Mhm.
focus being over there. So, talk us through your breastfeeding journey. So, I know you kind of had an experience with that, not knowing what to expect with your first. Did you have a plan of what you wanted to try to do this pregnancy?
Yes, yeah, I thought I was gonna be awesome again, oversupplier, it was gonna be no problem, and that was so different. With my breastfeeding journey with this, they basically tell you, like, when you're early, it can take a long time for your milk to come in anyway, so I just started pumping. I spoke with the lactation consultant while I still couldn't move, basically, because I had nothing else to do. And she said, "We can get you started on a pump. If you get any colostrum, we'll take it up to the NICU for you," things like that. I had to pump and then fill little syringes and put a tag on it for each baby so that they could, like, have the approval to give it to them. So it was rough. So I just did that while I was in the hospital. Wasn't really getting a lot, which I didn't expect to. I kind of expected, maybe when I get home, because it's been a few days, my milk will really come in, and that just never happened. I got maybe an ounce to 2 ounces, if that, total, not per breast, just total every time I pumped. And it was really hard. And so I kept meeting, one of the perks of the NICU is that you still get to meet with the lactation consultants. And so I met with them all the time when I was there, and they told me some tricks. The NICU does things called scent cloths, which are for you and for baby, actually, where they put blankets with the baby. And then at home, like, I would sleep with little baby blankets, and then you swap them. And they've seen a lot of studies that show, like, it helps moms with milk production because you don't get that same hormone release. It still didn't really work for me, and so I would pump when I was there with my babies. That would help, I'd get a little bit more, but I wasn't ever getting enough to solely breastfeed. And so when they came home, I did it for about a week, and then it was just, newborn twins is rough. I basically was like, it's either I sleep or I pump, and I can't do both. So they're already on, honestly, they were already like 80% formula. And I said, it's just easier. So I kept pumping for a little bit just to see if it would take off. And by the time I was about 2.5 months postpartum, it never did. And so I kind of just stopped. I used what I had, and then if I had anything extra, which I never did, but I did one time put it in their bath. And so it was very different. I don't know if it was because they were early or because the NICU or both, but I just couldn't supply enough for even one baby to fully feed. Whereas before with my son, I could pump like 6 ounces off each boob. And I was like, "This is great." And then now, years later, I was like, "I can't even get an ounce off each one." So it was humbling, to say the least. And so that's just what I did, and it worked really great for us. It was also super helpful that my husband could help, opposed to just trying to breastfeed. They never latched, and that was my personal choice. With my first, I breastfed fully. He latched, he did great. But with them, my big concern was that they were in the NICU. They used bottles all day at the NICU. And so I didn't really want them to have to deal with the nipple confusion that a lot of babies deal with. And so I told the NICU, like, no, I think I'm just gonna pump because it'll allow dad to help. And I just couldn't be there for all their feeds, it just isn't possible, and with twins, in the NICU, they do touch time, so a lot of people don't know this, and I didn't know, you don't get to just go in the NICU and, like, pick up your baby and hold them. You have a set schedule. And with twins, when I would go by myself, it was really hard because when you pick up your baby, they want you to hold them for at least, like, 45 minutes to an hour to get that full, like, hormone exposure and just to limit the movement. When that happens with twins, one twin's touch time is 8:30, one is 9, so you don't get to hold both. So I would go and be there for, like, 4 to 6 hours at a time when I would go to be able to make sure I could hold both of them for at least an hour. And then our baby A, the doctors legitimately told me to try to hold him skin to skin as much as possible because he wasn't doing as well. And so that was really hard too. And I will say, I don't know. I've talked to other moms, and this is pretty common, even outside of twins, but I felt really bad about it at the time. I always wanted more kids, but then once I was pregnant, I was like, there's no way I'm gonna love these kids as much as my first. Like, that's not gonna happen. And I talked to my mom about it because I'm her oldest and she has my sister after me. And I was like, I know you love her, but like, when did the love start? And she was like, listen, I promise that once they're born, you're going to feel that way. I got hit with postpartum depression pretty bad and I loved them, but I had a really hard time feeling like I had an equal connection with both of them in the NICU. And I, looking back, think it's a lot to do with the fact that my baby A needed a lot more attention. And so I was consistently holding him, consistently having to, make medical decisions for him and do things like that. Whereas my sweet little baby B, like, he was kind of just rocking. He was doing good. He didn't really have a lot of concerns. And so that was really hard for me as I definitely felt more of a connection with one baby over the other at first. I don't feel that way anymore, but it took honestly until they were probably 2 or 3 months to feel fully equal across the board. I always say that, like, there's a reason my baby B came home first because I got 2 days alone with just him, and I think that that helped a lot for me and him to just have some one-on-one time, but it was hard, like, having multiple kids is hard, but I think having 2 at the same time is difficult because you have to divide your attention, but nobody really prepares you for what that feels like if one is medically needy and the other isn't. And so that was a big struggle I dealt with. The postpartum depression also while they were in the NICU was horrible. I was sleeping all the time unless I was at the NICU. Um, I'm barely eating, crying 24/7. And everybody always says it takes a village when you're postpartum, and I had some really awesome people in my village, and I appreciate them. My mom and my husband's mom live super close by, so they were always checking in on us. My mom organized a meal train for when the babies came home, so we didn't have to worry about that. But in the period that they were in the NICU, I think I really had a lot of clarity on, like, who was there and who wasn't, and it was really hard to see that. I think my biggest cry for help was like, "Come over whenever, like, I'm here," because I was just alone all day. all the time. When my older son came home from being at his dad's, I like, this is horrible to say, and I don't feel this way anymore, but I, like, didn't care. I just wanted to, like, sleep and cry all day, and I couldn't because I had to get up. I had a 7-year-old who wanted to hang out with mom, and he had a pretty traumatic experience with my C-section, and so I just had, like, no interest in anything for a while, and that was pretty hard.
As you got in further with dealing with your postpartum depression, did you end up reaching out to someone to help with managing that, or how did that go for you?
So my grandpa's a psychiatrist, and so I kinda just would call him daily and just be like, "Am I crazy for feeling this way?" And he was like, "No." But I didn't feel like I had the time to talk to anybody else, truthfully, and so I kind of managed it with the people I had around me. My mom was super helpful with that because she had a really horrible postpartum depression, with both of us, and so she kinda told me what helped her, and it was, every day, make a list of some things you wanna get done, and she's like, "Always put a few things that are easy, like brush your teeth or put on deodorant," 'cause those postpartum hormones are wild. And so I did stuff like that. She forcefully got me out of the house sometimes to go do things, and so did my husband, and I always feel bad. I've apologized to him since, but, like, he used to be like, "No, we need to go do things outside of the NICU." And I just remember snapping at him and being like, "I don't care. I don't wanna go anywhere. I don't care about this. I don't care about alone time. I don't care about anybody. This is not what I wanna do." And he basically was like, "But that's the point. Like, you have to do other things." And so I just kind of relied on the people around me. There were some people that I thought were gonna be there for me, and they weren't. And it definitely got harder when our babies came home because in the NICU, you can only have, I think it was 6 people total visit the entire time they're there. Both of our families are divorced and remarried. So we have lots of parents, lots of step parents, lots of siblings, lots of cousins, aunts, uncles, and we had to be super restrictive with who could go in there. And that was hard. My oldest, their brother, didn't even get to meet them till they were a month and a half old because kids can't go in the NICU. And they don't have what they used to a long time ago, which is the viewing windows. They don't do that. And so maybe some do, but ours didn't. So it was rough. So couple the postpartum depression with you have brand new twins at home. Um, I was terrified that our baby A was going to have an event in the middle of the night and I wasn't going to be awake and he was going to die. And so I was not sleeping well. And it was just really rough having people that I thought were gonna show up for me, not even text me. Like, I still have family members that I love very, very much that never I don't need a congrats, but, like, I didn't some of my very close family members didn't send me anything about my babies being born, anything about "How are you?" Like, "Thinking about you," nothing. At all. And that was really hard. And we had some family members that lived extremely close that basically said, like, "Well, y'all aren't reaching out to us every day." And I said, "I have 2 new babies at home, like, trying to survive." And they just kinda spun it as, it was our fault we didn't reach out. And they live a mile away and didn't come over until the babies were, like, 4 months old. And so it was just rough, like, that hormone drop with twins, wild. And I didn't have postpartum depression with my first, and so it just felt like I didn't wanna do anything, didn't wanna talk to anyone, but I needed to. But I was so scared of being a mom, but that's all I wanted to do. It was just horrible. I told my husband to go back to work to save he got paternal leave, which was awesome, but I told him to go back until the babies came home, so I was just from a week after I had them and having to leave them, I was alone, except for when my mom would come hang out or things like that, and it was just rough. I didn't think it was gonna be that bad. So they came home and, like, right before they hit 1 month. Um, and hurdle-wise at home, like, baby-wise, I just really strictly followed the NICU schedule, which they all told me that they would get off of. They did not. So I'm very blessed to say that like my twins, even now, I have them on a really good schedule. We know when they're going to eat, when they're going to get hungry, typically know around their nap times. They're great babies. But bringing them home was rough. I remember the first night because our baby B had been home for 2 days. And so on his second night was when brother came home too. And I just remember my husband and I were sitting in bed and I just started sobbing. I was holding one of them and I was like, I can't do it. But if I don't do it, who's going to do it? What's our alternative? We give him away? And he was like, yeah, I think we just have to do it. And we just looked at each other and I was like, I think so. And so it was rough. It was his first kids, mine since I was a high schooler. And so we just did what kind of worked. We both talked to each other and told each other we're probably going to say things we don't mean, especially at 2 o'clock in the morning. But we got a good system down. We had a bedside bassinet, a twin bassinet. He would change diaper for one baby, hand them to me. I'd start feeding. And then he would change the diaper for our second baby and he'd start feeding them. When they fell asleep after being burped, we had to hold them upright for 20 to 30 minutes after, and then we could put them back. I always slept on the side with them, and I literally would like drape both hands into the bassinet to make sure they were still there. Because I don't know if anybody else has this feeling or if you did. I always thought about like a burglar breaking in and snatching the baby. I made him, listen to this, I made him put a deadbolt on the top of our door. All of our windows have window locks and bars. Like, I thought somebody was going to run in and steal my baby. So it was rough. We got a good schedule down. I think the postpartum depression lingered for maybe 2, 3 weeks after that. And then feeling basically like I didn't know what to do with myself and my life was just like falling apart, went away. That's when everything else started.
Well, awesome, Maddie. I really appreciate you sharing that whole journey. I know there were ups and downs, but getting to have those babies at home at the end is definitely the best feeling. Before we go, I wanted to see if you had any resources specifically that you used either during pregnancy or postpartum that you wanted to share.
I got a lot of resources from like my MFM office. And so just kind of little like leaflets that they would give was super helpful. But I did watch, oh my gosh, her name on TikTok is like Mama Jill. I did enjoy watching her stuff for a little bit because she had lost a bunch of weight and then was having a baby again. That was more about like food ideas. I watched a lot of stuff about gestational diabetes meals because you want everything you can't have when you're pregnant. I got a lot of resources from our NICU. There's an organization called Hand to Hold, and they provide you with like a little goodie bag in the NICU, and you get this super cute charm. It's like charm necklace bracelet thing, and for each milestone your baby has to hit is a charm. And so we have those. And then my husband was my best support, and my mom and his mom. Shout out to Leela and Amy, they're the best. And then I know you know this, but I ended up making like probably one of the people I'd consider one of my best friends right now in the NICU. Our babies, she didn't have twins, but our babies were, we call them NICU neighbors. Their bassinets were next to each other. And I told her one day, I was like, oh my gosh, I love your daughter's outfit. And she said, thanks. We reconnected on TikTok randomly and have been friends since. And she's been super helpful because I definitely feel like we've gone through the trenches together. And so, yeah, just all the people in my life who've kind of poured into us has been super helpful.
And so I know the friend you were actually mentioning is Sydney, who shared her story on episode 6. So anyone who wants to hear about her full journey and her dealing with the NICU and all of that can happily go over to episode 6, and I will link that in the show notes below if you're interested. Thank you again so much, Maddie, for coming on the podcast. I truly, truly appreciate you sharing your story and being open from the vulnerability of being pregnant at 16 to now having the roller coaster of twins. So I appreciate it. And I know that you will help so many other moms going through similar things. So thank you again. And we will talk to you on the next one.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. If you enjoyed this episode and want more stories just like this one, please be sure to like and follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, if you have a moment, please consider leaving us a positive review wherever you're listening to this show. These reviews are the best way for the algorithm to push out our show and get us in front of other plus-size moms who may be looking for a community like this one. Your kind words can help make sure that no one has to go through this journey alone. If you are a fellow plus-size mom and would be interested in sharing your story, please reach out to us at biggerthanbirthpodcast@gmail.com. Use the subject line, "Share my story," and I will be sure to get back to you as soon as possible. Want to put a face to a voice? Head over to any of our social media pages linked in the show notes below to see more photos of today's guest. Any resources or topics discussed in today's episodes will also be linked below. Thanks again for being a part of the Bigger Than Birth community, and we will see you next week. Bye!